We are very privileged again to have Honorable Emma, one of the youngest ministers in the world, join us today. So please welcome her to the stage to give us a closing remark, and then hand back to the MC.
Thank you so much, Ellie, for welcoming me. A very good evening, everybody. Special greetings to Honorable Rosemary, the Minister of Youth, and my older sister from Rwanda. It's such a pleasure to be back here in Kigali, of course. I've been here for a while, but more importantly, to be here with all of you, the young people of the Commonwealth. I'd like to start my remarks by saying that there is a common saying back home in Namibia that I learned while growing up. And the saying is, and I quote, "Take the future into your own hands." Almost every adult that I encountered when speaking to them about my education, my activities at school, what I'm interested in, they would say the phrase, "Take the future into your own hands." And most times, the adults would say this in a way that would mean that, one, I should take my own future into my own hands by ensuring that I study very hard, which I did. They also said, stay away from boys and focus on your school so you do not get distracted and hopefully not fall pregnant as a teenager and have an unwanted pregnancy. Or they would also say that phrase because they would want me to get involved in social activities to gain new skills or improve on the skills they already have. Well, for as long as I can remember, many, many young people I've interacted with have done the above. If they had an opportunity to go to school, they made sure they studied hard. And they took the future into their own hands in that aspect. If it means advocating for better communities, being advocates of the most vulnerable in their communities, representing themselves and other young people, voicing out concerns, so those that have the ability to change matters can do so. They've done so by organizing, fundraising, getting an education against all odds, and becoming young mothers and fathers and picking themselves up again to ensure that they're able to get back into the game, even though they were not empowered enough with the right information to make wise decisions and better informed decisions where that is concerned, yet they were able to persevere. And in 2022, as we're sitting here today, we're talking about the same thing I've been hearing as I was growing up. And the theme being here at the Commonwealth Youth Forum, in a way for us to take charge of our future. And I believe rightfully so. We need, as young people, to take charge of our future. And in the words of Frantz Fanon, who in The Wretched of the Earth wrote, and I quote, "Each generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it." And I wanted to look at this quote that I've read many, many times through Frantz Fanon's books and work, the term relative obscurity. It means having meaning or significance only in relation to something else, and it is not absolute. And Shabana, who was here earlier, spoke about how, and I quote, "My education was given a purpose." The moment education for girls became a challenge, she found her mission in the place she found herself. I mean, she even used the words that she feels privileged to have had an education. And how many of us can feel the same when the statistics say something else? And my heart really goes out to the young women and girls in Afghanistan who cannot get an education because it's declared illegal. And I've seen it with this year's BBC 100 Women, that the list of 100 women around the world was made up of 50 women in Afghanistan who are working against all odds to ensure that women and girls are empowered and are able to take up the space that they deserve. Coming back to the term relative obscurity, I'd like to reflect on something Veda said. And I must say, Veda, I was at ALU. I visited them. It was such a great experience. I can only commend the work that you guys are doing there. And of course, I'd like you to pass my regards to Fred. And it's something you said, Veda. You said, I was able to skip many steps on the ladder due to my education. And I think Shabana put it so nicely that you didn't necessarily quit. You pivoted. And it reminds me back to something I read, I think a couple of years ago, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, when things just got really hard, difficult to educate, the health systems were failing. Young people were committing suicide more than ever before because of the mental pressures that came with the pandemic, with loss of education, with loss of income. And the quote said, do not quit, rest, and try again. And I think, Veda, that's what you did. I do not necessarily think you quit. I think you rested and you pivoted, like Shabana said, and you tried again. And I believe that as our generation of young people, in this relative obscurity of finding our mission and fulfilling it and hopefully not betraying it by taking charge of our future, we do not quit, we just rest, we pivot, and we try again. But the question still remains, what is our generational mission as we're seated here today? The forum has a wide range of sub-themes, speaking about climate change, speaking about education, about work and young people, talking about gender equality, talking about equitable and qualitative access to education, youth opportunities for us as young people. But then again, I'd like to add my own, which is young people finding a place in decision-making processes. And then this comes back to me reflecting on my journey. And I know Ellie was asking Veda and Shabana to reflect on their journey. And I quickly learned and I quickly realized that my own journey started with education. Having the ability to decipher concepts and principles and applying them across my life. And similar to something they said that they got value, not necessarily in the classroom, some of the life lessons they learned out of the classroom. And that is true for myself as well. I found myself doing a law degree at the university and hardly being in class because the concepts that I would sit in a class for 2 hours, I could gather myself. I could absorb myself by reading just by myself. And I needed more skills. I needed the skill of critical thinking. I needed the skill on how to pitch an idea in 3 minutes. I needed the skill on how I could think on my feet. I needed the skill on how to network and negotiate. And some of those skills I was not able to acquire in the classroom. I had to find ways outside of the classroom to acquire those skills. And I think as young people, as we discover our mission and we take charge of our future, we need to continuously upskill ourselves. We need, in many places and at many times, to be the expert in the room because they do look down on us. And as being a young minister, appointed at the age of 23, I get that a lot. So you must continuously ensure that you upskill yourself. And I've seen that working in the space of youth activism for quite a long time before I transitioned to government, that we have been doing exceptionally well in trying to discover our mission, in speaking up, in doing, in actively being part of conversations that we forcefully put ourselves in because we know that the decisions made today will shape our reality tomorrow. And that's our future we'd like to take charge of. But we cannot relent, we cannot quit, we just have to rest and pick up the tempo and pivot because our future depends on it. There is no room for us to give up. If we do not take charge today, it might be too late to do so. Therefore, I would like to end my remarks with a quote from a departed current of the African soil, Thomas Sankara. Thomas Sankara once said, and I quote, You cannot carry out a fundamental change without a certain amount of madness. In this case, it comes from nonconformity, the courage to turn your back on the old formula, the courage to invent the future. Let us all have the courage from today and moving forward to invent our own future and take charge of it. I thank you so much for your kind attention.